Let's talk a little bit about Michigan against Alabama. Like we said, noon in Tampa on New Year's Eve. Plenty of time for us to cover the game, do our writing afterwards, and be able to make it to the champagne at midnight. Anthony, the most sad champagne I've ever had was a few years ago at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. Michigan gets routed by Georgia, and it was a night game. So you're starting your writing, and it was the most sad thing ever. They gave everyone a little mini bottle or a little mini glass of champagne. I think it was a little mini bottle. You pour it in, and I'm sitting there after Michigan just got killed, 34-11 or whatever. I'm like, yeah, Happy New Year. But, regardless of this one, this is where I want to start with this game. Regardless of what happens, it doesn't mean this game doesn't matter, but I'm not going to watch this game, see what happens, and then draw a bunch of conclusions about what this means for this player, this coach, this team next season, for a few reasons. One, your best players aren't playing. Two, you're adding some players. We just talked about some of them, including Justice Haynes. 8 transfer commits so far, a really solid freshman class, really good freshman class coming in, led by Bryce Underwood. Like, this team's going to look so much different next year. So if Michigan loses 45-10, I'm not going to have a sad bottle of champagne. I will have a slightly, I'll be a little more energetic. But I don't think it's necessarily a referendum on anything. I don't think it means anything about what the 7-5 regular season was before that. I think that was kind of its own thing. And hopefully that the people on social media will follow suit with that after the game, no matter what happens. And I'm not saying Michigan can't win this game. Hell, maybe it would tell something if they do win it, but if they lose it, I'm not taking a ton of stock into that.
No, in a lot of ways, I feel like, and just kind of thinking how setting the expectation in terms of how I am going to react to this to a certain extent, like how we cover it. It almost kind of feels like the spring game, right? Where, like, regardless of game result, maybe you're looking at how the offensive line, like maybe a couple of the freshman offensive linemen get in there, and maybe we see, I don't know, the couple like Trey Pierce step up at defensive tackle. Like, outside of those little positional sort of takeaways, I'm not going to sit here and really draw much of anything from this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is, it is an exhibition. I think it's different than what, the bowl, a bowl trip used to be kind of a reward for what your season was and one last ride with the guys you had. And we know we've had this conversation already. Like, this, it's just not that anymore. So it's evaluation, especially for some of the younger guys, to see how they fare against an SEC team that, the name, I mean, not on the jersey, but just the name that'll be on the other sideline is still Alabama. And it's a measuring stick game. It's a progress game for, in a lot of respects. So to me, I'm not, listen, I'm going down to Tampa to watch a football game be played because they are fleeting. The season goes quick. I don't think that game result one way or another, if they win it, I don't think that necessarily means, oh, look at all the momentum they have going to the offseason now. And if they lose it, it's not, oh gosh, all the momentum they did have going into the offseason is now gone. It's just, in the vacuum of bowl season, it is a game. And these two teams were put together because of television, because of the name brands, to get those eyeballs to tune in. So it's still a football game. It is still something where we can draw at least maybe a rough sketch of what this depth chart might look like heading into spring ball. But other than that, you're really just going down there to see that cool pirate ship at Raymond James Stadium and go from there. But there's not a lot for me to draw from it. I just have to be honest. And I'm not pay attention. I'm not saying don't pay attention to our coverage. Don't watch the game, but
please do.
I don't know what else to take away from this.
So yeah, and there'll be a lot of Michigan players not playing. Alabama, on the other hand, has everyone who hasn't portaled out is playing, including guys who will go to the NFL after this season. So that's kind of why my hypothetical was 45-10, right? It's not necessarily my prediction. We will give those on the site over at thewolverine.com before the game. I'm sure we'll talk about them on Monday's show the day before the game as well. But, that's why my hypothetical is that way, because I think Alabama, which is a 12.5-point favorite right now, has the leg up. They got all their guys going. This was a team that almost made the college football playoff this season. Michigan, looks like Alex Orji's been practicing with the team, even though he's in the portal. So you'll have your two top quarterbacks, Davis Warren, Alex Orji, at least I assume. Donovan Edwards out. Kalel Mullings, no word on him, I would imagine, especially because he was hurt at the end of the Ohio State game. He doesn't go. You don't have your leading wide receiver in Tyler Morris. You don't have your tight end in Colston Loveland. You may not have Miles Hinton at left tackle. You won't have Mason Graham. You won't have Kenneth Grant. You won't have Josiah Stewart. You won't have Will Johnson. So that's kind of why. Alabama seems somewhat motivated coming into this game just because they did miss out on the playoff. They did lose to Michigan to end last season. The many Washington transfers they brought in with Kalen DeBoer did lose to Michigan to end last season as well in the national championship game. And I will say, if I could be the Grinch for a second, I think this Michigan defense, without the guys we just listed, KG, Mason, Will Johnson, Josiah Stewart, I think they're going to have a really tough time up front against Alabama. I think Jalen Milroe, unless he makes some big mistakes, which he easily could, he threw 3 picks in the 24-3 loss to Oklahoma this year. Unless he does that, I think he's going to have a lot of success running around, throwing the ball, making plays. It's going to be tough to cover their wide receivers. Not a deep wide receiving core. They only have 4 healthy scholarship wide receivers now after some entered the portal. But you do have Ryan Williams, 17-year-old phenom, 5-star freshman, who's been unbelievable this year. I just think this defense, and again, it won't be a referendum on Wink Martindale or what this defense is going to be, but I think they're going to have a tough time. You're looking at an Alabama offensive line with 4 starters that played against Michigan last year, that started against Michigan last year. One of them, Parker Brailsford, was the center for Washington in the CFP. 3 others coming back. 1 new starter at right tackle replaces J.C. Latham. But I think it's going to be a big challenge for this depleted Michigan defense against Alabama's offense.
Huge challenge. And it's not, because I know there are inherently people who will jump in the comments and say, oh, you guys are being negative. Like,
please
they got to go out there and play.
Yeah.
Please comment. Like, I won't read them, but please comment, because sometimes they make me sad. And also Kenneth Grant in the draft too.
Yep.
I know there was some people holding out hope that maybe he'd come back. It seemed like maybe Michigan kind of tried, but it seemed pretty telling last week when we talked to Rayshon Benny, and he said that he thought that KG was on a beach in the Bahamas or Cancun somewhere. That seemed like a bit of an omen. So it's going to be incredibly difficult. I don't, again, could I see them conjuring up a defensive game plan to kind of keep Alabama into the mid-20s or maybe the low 30s? I could. I really question, we already know this was a team that was limited in its offensive firepower. And then it's looking like you're not going to have the guys that made up most of your production on what was one of the, am I overstating it by saying maybe one of the 10 worst offenses in college football this year? 15, whatever.
Yeah.
So right now, I haven't put in a staff pick yet. My gut says something like 27-10 Alabama. And again, I'm not putting a whole lot into the game result here. I want to see what they have, especially some of the young guys that they have that will be thrust into these bigger roles next year. And because it's an Alabama team that I think I could be wrong, but they're pretty young too. Or was this a team kind of cobbled together with portal guys? I'm not 100% sure, but just go out there, compete. Go out there, compete, see what happens. Hey, maybe you can win a bar fight like you did in Columbus. Although I think it would have to look a lot different than that, just because you don't have that game-wrecking defensive line that will be out there. But I struggled to kind of find a path for Michigan to not only win this game, but keep it within a couple scores, which is kind of disappointing to a certain extent. I don't want to say it feels like a death march. It just kind of feels like a crawl to an inevitable result. But we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah. But I agree. I do think That's the thing. Like the heroics we saw against Ohio State, it's just not the same Michigan team. And of course, they'll get dragged if they do lose big. From people who want them to lose, but it's not.
Well, if they lose, it won't be people who want them to lose. It'll be Michigan fans too.
Well, some, yeah. I mean, I agree, but again, it's just not the team that was built to play this 2024 season, unfortunately. Milroe, very up and down year for Alabama, completing 65.9% of his passes, only 15 touchdowns, 10 picks. He threw 6 of his 10 picks in the team's losses. Again, they scored 3 points against Oklahoma. He had 3 picks. He was one of the big issues. So if he makes some mistakes against a Michigan secondary that's largely intact from what it was at the end of the season, because you didn't have Will Johnson anyway, then I think it opens the door for Michigan here. You got to win the field position battle, all that, all the prerequisites that this team has had all year, things they did against Ohio State that led to them pulling off the victory against a very quality opponent. He's, Milroe's their leading rusher this year. On the other side of the ball, I think those 2 linebackers that come back that are pretty high NFL draft prospects, Deontay Lawson and Jahad Campbell, are lucky, or at least glad that Tyler Morris won't be suiting up on the other side, because he ran past the entire defense in the Rose Bowl last year. Very, very solid defense. Not a great defense. Doesn't have those elite playmakers that you are used to seeing from Alabama. Even though we saw last year with Dallas Turner coming off the edge, guys like that, Chris Braswell, Damani Jackson starting at corner, Keon Sabb, former Michigan safety, starting at safety. It's a very solid defense, but at the same time, when you look at Michigan's offense, you can get by one game maybe without Colston Loveland and win, but another, I guess they are 2-0 without him this year, but no Loveland, probably no Mullings, no Edwards, maybe no Hinton. It's very, very tough to see them putting up many points. I believe Vegas has their over-under for total points, Michigan offense, at 14.5 right now. I think that's about accurate. I don't know that I would even take the over, though, on that.
I would probably take the under. Like I said, like 13 points feels right. 10, 13, somewhere in that range. Maybe another way to frame it is, instead of lamenting who is not going to be out there, I mean, maybe some of the guys that will have an opportunity in those spots, like Colston Loveland, his absence is going to lend itself to, a bigger showcase for guys like Marlon Klein, Hogan Hansen, who, when you miss out on, they were in on Max Clare goes to Ohio State. Now it's this room full of guys that, I mean, I think that's a position group where you can kind of weather that storm for next season. And I think I would think Klein and Hansen are your top 2 heading into next year. So we get to see what those guys look like in an expanded role. We've seen that for a few games this year, but the backfield rotation, let's see what Jordan Marshall and Ben Hall can do. Let's see, maybe we'll see what, Andrew Sprague is able to do, at one of the tackle spots. So to me, I think that's where most of the intrigue comes from, is not that, not going into the game and, kind of sulking about who's there and who's not there, who's opted out. But I want to see how the guys that step into those vacated roles fare, because, I mean, there's a lot of production and a lot of star power that they are going to have to replace next season. And some of it's going to have to come on the margins from, being better in different areas. But, I want to see how the next in line at tight end looks. I want to see someone step up at wide receiver, maybe a guy like a freshman in Channing Goodwin, who the staff thinks very highly of. Maybe we see him get some run in a game like this. Would love to see a guy like Fred Moore, who I still think highly of, have a good game, put some good stuff on film against a solid Alabama defense. So for me, on both sides of the ball, that's where I'm intrigued, and that's what I'm excited for, is to see, there's some guys you need to replace probably via the portal, but how much of that production can you replace with what you have? And regardless of game result, just to kind of see what that pecking order looks like, that's what provides the most intrigue for me heading into this game.
I just hope the offensive line can hold up enough to, make sure run plays aren't being blown up, where we can see Benjamin Hall and Jordan Marshall have a little bit of success, where we can see Davis Warren get the protection he needs. You can't have a game like the Indiana game where he was under pressure on 64% of his dropbacks, and you just can't get anything going offensively when you do that. So that would be my biggest concern, I guess, is the line, especially if Hinton doesn't play. But yeah, we'll see how Michigan holds up in this game. We'll have coverage from Tampa. So head to thewolverine.com throughout the weekend and leading into Tuesday's game. Ring in the new year with us over there using the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1.